Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and each day I invite you to join me as we reflect on a significant moment from our shared past. Today is November 30th, and we're looking back 71 years to November 30th, 1954. On that Tuesday afternoon in Sylacauga, Alabama, Ann Hodges was taking a nap on her living room couch, wrapped in quilts against the November chill. Around 12:46 p.m., something extraordinary happened, something that had never been confirmed to have occurred to any human being in recorded history. A meteorite, roughly the size of a grapefruit and weighing 8.5 pounds, came screaming through Earth's atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour. It crashed through the roof of the Hodges home, ricocheted off a large wooden console radio, and struck Ann Hodges on her left hip as she slept. The impact left a massive bruise the size of a pineapple, but miraculously, it didn't kill her. Ann Hodges became the first and, to this day, the only confirmed person in history to be struck by a meteorite. The odds of this happening are estimated at somewhere around 1 in several trillion. You're more likely to be struck by lightning multiple times, win the lottery twice, and get attacked by a shark, all in the same year. But what happened after the meteorite hit is almost as remarkable as the impact itself. The story involves legal battles, scientific disputes, media circuses, and the very human question of what to do when the universe literally drops a rock on you. Ann Hodges was 34 years old, living with her husband Eugene in a rented house in Sylacauga, a small town in central Alabama. On that November afternoon, she had decided to take a nap after lunch. Her husband was at work. The house was quiet. Then came an explosion that neighbors heard from blocks away. The meteorite had punched a hole through the roof, destroyed part of the ceiling, and struck the console radio before hitting Ann. The radio's wooden case absorbed some of the impact, probably saving her life. But the rock still hit her with enough force to knock her off the couch and leave a bruise that would turn spectacular shades of purple and black. Ann's first thought, understandably, was confusion. She didn't know what had hit her. She saw a grapefruit-sized rock on the floor, surrounded by debris from the ceiling and radio. Her side hurt terribly. Neighbors rushed in, drawn by the noise. Someone called the police. Within minutes, Ann's living room was filled with people trying to understand what had just happened. The local authorities initially suspected vandalism or some kind of prank, but the hole in the roof went straight up. There was no one on the roof or nearby who could have thrown the rock, and the rock itself was strange. Dark, heavy, with a smooth black crust that looked like it had been burned. Someone suggested it might be a meteorite. The police chief called the local airport to ask if any planes had been over the area, as maybe something had fallen from an aircraft. Then someone remembered. There had been reports that morning of a bright fireball in the sky, visible across several states. People from Mississippi to Georgia had seen a brilliant streak of light, followed by sonic booms. The pieces came together. This was a meteorite. A rock from space had come through Ann Hodges' roof and hit her while she slept. The realization was stunning. Nothing quite like this had ever been documented. News of the meteorite strike spread with remarkable speed. By the next morning, Ann Hodges' story was front-page news across the country. Journalists descended on Sylacauga. Photographers wanted pictures of Ann. her bruise, the damaged house, and especially the meteorite. Life magazine sent a photographer. Wire Services carried the story internationally. Ann Hodges, a quiet housewife from small-town Alabama, had become internationally famous overnight. The attention was overwhelming. Anne and Eugene had never dealt with anything like this. Reporters camped outside their house. Strangers knocked on their door. Everyone wanted to see the bruise, touch the meteorite, and hear the story directly. Anne gave interview after interview, describing the impact, the pain, the confusion, the realization of what had happened. Scientists from the Geological Survey and various universities wanted to examine the meteorite. The Air Force sent investigators because in the Cold War era, they needed to verify this wasn't some Soviet technology or weapon. Geologists analyzed fragments and confirmed it was indeed a meteorite, a chondrite, a type of stony meteorite common in space but rarely found on Earth because most burn up completely in the atmosphere. The scientific consensus was clear. Ann Hodges had been struck by a genuine meteorite, making her the first confirmed human to be hit by an extraterrestrial object. The odds of this happening were so astronomically small that some scientists initially doubted the story. But the physical evidence, the hole in the roof, the damaged radio, Ann's bruise, and the meteorite itself was irrefutable. Here's where things got complicated. Who owned the meteorite? Ann and Eugene Hodges assumed it was theirs. It had hit Ann in their house, causing her injury and property damage. Surely they owned it, but Bertie Guy, their landlady who owned the house, disagreed. The meteorite had fallen on her property, she argued, damaging her roof. She owned the meteorite. This wasn't just academic. The meteorite had become valuable. Museums wanted to purchase it. Private collectors made offers. The Smithsonian Institution expressed interest. What had been a rock worth nothing was now potentially worth thousands of dollars. Significant money in 1954. Mrs. Guy sued the Hodges for possession of the meteorite. The case dragged through Alabama courts for months. The legal question was genuinely novel. Who owns an object that falls from space onto rented property? There was little precedent. Property law dealt with things like trees, minerals, and rainfall, but meteorites? The Hodges, meanwhile, couldn't capitalize on their sudden fame because they didn't physically possess the meteorite. It was being held as evidence during the legal proceedings. They couldn't sell it, display it, or even keep it in their home. The thing that had made them famous and that might have compensated them for the trauma and injury was tied up in court. The legal battle strained the Hodges marriage. Eugene wanted to fight for the meteorite. Anne just wanted the whole ordeal to be over. The stress of the media attention, the lawsuit, and the ongoing controversy was taking a toll. What should have been an amazing story had become exhausting and dispiriting. Eventually, the Hodges settled with Mrs. Guy, paying her $500 for the rights to the meteorite, a substantial sum in 1954. But by then, public interest had waned. The offers from museums and collectors were lower. Eugene tried to sell the meteorite for $5,000, but couldn't find a buyer at that price. The opportunity had passed. The Hodges kept the meteorite for several years, but it brought them little joy. The meteorite sat in their home, a conversation piece, but also a reminder of all the stress and disappointment that had followed the impact. Anne grew to resent it. She would later say the meteorite ruined her life. Not the effect itself, but everything that came after. The media circus, the legal battle, the strain on her marriage, and the way people treated her as a curiosity rather than a person. In 1956, Anne donated the meteorite to the Alabama Museum of Natural History, where it remains today. She wanted it out of her house. She didn't want money for it anymore. She just wanted to move on. But moving on proved difficult. Anne and Eugene divorced in the early 1960s. Anne suffered from emotional problems and had difficulty holding jobs. She died in 1972 at just 52 years old in a nursing home. Eugene remarried and lived into the 1990s, but he rarely spoke about the meteorite in later years. The story has a sad coda. Another Sylacauga resident, Julius Kempis McKinney, found another fragment of the same meteorite that had hit Ann Hodges. His piece had landed in a field the same day. He quickly sold it to the Smithsonian for enough money to buy a house and a car. McKinney, who handled the situation quietly and without drama, profited substantially from the same meteorite fall that brought the Hodges only troubles. Ann Hodges' experience raises fascinating questions about the risks we face from space. Meteorites hit Earth constantly. An estimated 40,000 tons of space material falls to Earth each year, but most of it burns up completely in the atmosphere. What remains is usually small and lands in oceans or unpopulated areas. A meteorite hitting a building is rare. A meteorite hitting a person is extraordinarily rare. Before Ann Hodges, there were anecdotal reports of people or animals being struck by meteorites, but none were confirmed. An Egyptian dog was supposedly killed by a meteorite in the 1900s. Medieval sources mentioned possible strikes, but the documentation was insufficient. Ann Hodges' case is the only one with physical evidence, medical documentation, and scientific verification. Since 1954, we know of only a few other near misses or indirect impacts. In 1992, a meteorite struck a car in Peekskill, New York. The car was parked and unoccupied, and the meteorite's impact was caught on video by people watching a football game. In 2013, a large meteor exploded over Chelyabinsk, Russia, with a force equivalent to 30 Hiroshima bombs. The shockwave injured over 1,500 people, mostly from broken glass, but a meteorite fragment directly struck no one. The Hodges meteorite was part of a larger meteoroid that broke up in the atmosphere. The fireball people saw that morning was the meteoroid entering Earth's atmosphere at perhaps 40,000 miles per hour, heating to thousands of degrees and fragmenting. Multiple pieces fell across Alabama. Most were never found. Two were Ann Hodges' piece and Julius McKinney's piece. The fact that Ann survived the impact is remarkable. The meteorite had slowed considerably during atmospheric entry and had ricocheted off the radio, losing more energy, but it still struck with enough force to cause serious injury. A direct hit to the head would likely have been fatal. While meteorites striking people remain extremely rare, the threat from space is real and larger than most people realize. Small meteorites like the one that hit Ann Hodges are essentially harmless at the population level. The odds of any specific person being hit are so small as to be negligible. But larger impacts are a different story. The Chelyabinsk meteor in 2013 was about 60 feet across and exploded with enormous force, damaging thousands of buildings. The Tunguska event in 1908 involved an object perhaps 300 feet across that exploded over Siberia, flattening 800 square miles of forest. If a Tunguska-sized impact occurred over a city today, casualties would be catastrophic. And we know from geological evidence that much larger impacts have occurred. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago was perhaps 6 miles across. Its impact caused global devastation. Smaller but still substantial impacts have occurred throughout Earth's history, some likely affecting human populations. Scientists now actively track near-Earth objects. asteroids and comets whose orbits bring them close to Earth. NASA and other space agencies maintain catalogs of these objects, calculating their trajectories and assessing impact risks. We've identified most of the really large civilization-threatening asteroids, and none are on collision courses that we know of. But smaller objects, Chelyabinsk-sized or Tunguska-sized, are more complex to track. Thousands likely remain undetected. The good news is that we're developing planetary defense capabilities. NASA's DART mission in 2022 successfully demonstrated that we can change an asteroid's trajectory by deliberately crashing a spacecraft into it. If we detect a threatening asteroid far enough in advance, we might be able to deflect it. This is no longer science fiction, it's practical engineering. What makes Ann Hodges' story enduring isn't just the astronomical odds or the scientific significance. It's the very human story of how she and those around her responded to an extraordinary event. Anne didn't ask to be famous. She didn't seek attention. She was taking a nap in her home when the universe quite literally dropped a rock on her. The physical injury was real, but not life-threatening. The damage to her house was repairable. What really harmed her was how people, the media, the legal system, curious strangers, even her landlady, responded to her experience. The media treated her as a curiosity, not a person. The legal battle treated the meteorite as property, not as something intrinsically connected to her traumatic experience. The public gawked at her bruise and wanted to touch the rock, but had little empathy for what she was going through. Her extraordinary experience became commodified, litigated, and sensationalized. This is a pattern we see repeatedly when ordinary people experience extraordinary events. They become famous not for anything they achieved, but for something that happened to them. They're expected to monetize the experience, to parlay it into opportunity. When they can't or don't, they're seen as failures. The system isn't designed to help them, it's designed to extract value from their story. Ann Hodges didn't want to be the woman who got hit by a meteorite. She wanted to be Ann Hodges with a normal life. But after November 30th, 1954, that was impossible. She would always be the meteorite lady, defined by a single traumatic moment that she had no control over. The meteorite that struck Ann Hodges was random, a rock that had been orbiting the sun for billions of years. Its trajectory determined by gravitational interactions, collisions, and orbital mechanics. It had no purpose, no intent. It just happened to be in a particular place at a particular time. And so too did Ann Hodges. This randomness is unsettling. We like to believe events have meaning, that things happen for reasons, that the universe operates according to some plan or justice. But sometimes rocks just fall from the sky and hit people taking naps. There's no lesson, no cosmic purpose. It's just probability playing out across vast numbers of events. Yet even in randomness, humans find meaning. Ann Hodges' story became part of scientific history, helping us understand meteorite impacts and their effects. The Hodges meteorite, now in the Alabama Museum of Natural History, educates visitors about meteors, asteroids, and the dynamic universe we inhabit. Ann's experience, though painful for her, contributed to human knowledge. Perhaps that's the best we can do with random events. Document them, learn from them, and try to extract whatever understanding we can. Ann Hodges didn't choose to be struck by a meteorite, but she eventually chose to donate the meteorite to a museum where it could serve educational purposes. That choice transformed a random, traumatic event into something that might benefit others. Today, the Hodges meteorite sits in a display case at the University of Alabama's museum. Visitors can see the rock that struck Ann Hodges, read her story, and marvel at the improbability of it all. Ann Hodges herself is forgotten, mainly except by meteorite enthusiasts and those interested in unusual historical events. She has no monument, no holiday named for her, no lasting fame, but she holds a unique place in human history, the only confirmed person ever struck by a meteorite. In an odd way, her story is reassuring. Despite the countless meteorites that hit Earth every year, despite the billions of humans who have lived on this planet, only one person has ever been confirmed struck by one. The odds are overwhelmingly in our favor. We have far more to fear from cars, lightning, disease, and other humans than from rocks falling from space. But Ann's story also reminds us that improbable events do happen. The universe is vast, ancient, and operates on scales we can barely comprehend. Sometimes those cosmic scales intersect with individual human lives in extraordinary ways. When they do, all we can do is try to cope, to make sense of senseless events, and to find whatever meaning we can in the random chaos of existence. Thank you for joining me today on the Daily History Chronicle. As philosopher George Santayana reminds us, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Today we explored how Ann Hodges became the only confirmed person struck by a meteorite. A story that's simultaneously about astronomical odds, human responses to extraordinary events, and how the universe occasionally reminds us that we live in a vast cosmos that operates without regard for our plans or comfort. Her story teaches us that improbable events do happen, that how we respond to trauma matters more than the trauma itself, and that even random cosmic events can contribute to human knowledge when we choose to learn from them rather than simply exploit them. Until tomorrow, may your day be enriched by the lessons of history.